Welcome to another episode of the American Market Alchemist podcast. Today, I have the great pleasure of welcoming Guillaume Linossier as a guest. Today, he is the founder of Saola and based in Colorado, but originally from Chambéry, so just down the road from Grenoble, where I'm at. Guillaume, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thank you.
All right. How's the weather in Colorado today?
Weather is nice today. It was cold yesterday. The spring has yet to come.
Yeah, all right. So kind of here in Grenoble,
Yeah,
it's the same thing.
yeah.
It's like
I
a
think it's
nice
the same. Yeah.
November day, pretty much, even though it is May. Right. So can you maybe start off by telling us a little bit about who you are, what your company does, and how you came up with the idea?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so my name is Guillaume. So I'm, as you mentioned, from Chambéry in France, and I've worked in the outdoor industry for about 15 years before launching Saola. And out of those, these 15 years, 13 were in the US, already based in Colorado. And then I left the company I used to work for in 2016, and really with in mind, I wanted to launch a business with a mission for the environment.
Right. Yeah.
So I had two really clear missions in mind from the beginning. So it was to work on sustainable manufacturing and also help NGOs preserving wildlife.
Okay, very interesting.
So the brand was launched in 2018.
Yeah.
We sell in Europe, in the US, and in Asia now. And I came back to Colorado last year to really refocus our growth on the US and Canadian markets.
Okay, very interesting. So something you mentioned there in the intro that you're very, I said one of your missions is to do things with sustainable development and sustainable manufacturing. And one of the questions that often comes up regarding the American market, and we're going to talk more about the American market specifically.
Yep.
From what you see, what is the value or the perception of environmentally friendly products for American clients? How much is that a selling point or a value add for Americans?
It really depends on the regions and the states.
Right.
I would say, if you look at the West Coast, the East Coast, and like the Rockies where we are, it's it's a very environmentally focused. So this is definitely a great, addition or help for us to be really committed.
Right.
If you go to some other states, like more in the middle of the countries, it's less of a topic. I would say, we do good business in the Midwest.
Sure.
But people buy first, the products, the style, the comfort, before the environmental, story. And but it's interesting also when we look at our online sales. In fact, the Californian market is about 25% of the online sales. But the third state is Texas, where I think coming from Europe, you wouldn't expect Texas to be a strong market for us.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that you mentioned Texas. I think Texas has a lot of stereotypes around it that are becoming less and less true. I say that because recently I interviewed a founder of a company called Absolute Sensing. And same thing, they're very active in Texas. And he said, a lot of people are concerned about question of environment there, whereas you wouldn't really think of Texans as being the most environmentally concerned clients. But again, it maybe also depends on what region of that state, because Texas is basically the size of France, right?
It depends on Austin, for example, is, you have a lot of people from outside of Texas who move there. A lot of people from California are moving to Texas as well for business or tax reasons. So that's definitely mixing, the population of the state, and so you can see, different trends for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think personally, I think Austin is like the new Silicon Valley because so many people are flocking to it. Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about your decision to launch directly in the US. Now, if if I remember correctly, you told me that you launched in the US in 2018, and then
Mm-hmm.
afterwards you launched in Europe a year later. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And so what
Mm-hmm.
was the I guess the thinking or the strategy behind that decision to go directly into the US?
I mean, first, back then, all my connections were in the US. I did not
Mm,
have many connections in Europe, so that was definitely one of the reasons.
sure.
But also, the US market it's a tough market, but
Mm,
if you do it right, I mean, it can grow quite fast. And also, if you look at Europe or Asia, I mean, that's a lot of the buyers in
mm,
for stores are
right.
looking at the trends in the US. So if you have some business and good business in the US, it definitely helps you with your European and Asian businesses as well. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So it's kind of like succeed in the US is almost like a kind of a credibility marker when you're going into
Hmm.
other markets. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so I
And
yeah,
for
you
and
yeah.
sorry, yeah, just for example,
Yeah.
in fact, our first customer in the US was REI. It's the largest outdoor chain
Mm,
in the US and in the world. And
right.
in fact, all the big chains in Europe are always looking at what REI is doing. So being there the first year really helped us. In fact, opening some accounts, like in Germany, some big accounts because they saw us being at REI in the US.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, REI is I my sister lives in Seattle. They have an REI shop and
Hmm.
it's the first
Yeah.
thing I always want to go visit when I go to
Yeah.
Seattle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Um
awesome. Yeah.
it is it's an awesome store. Okay. So you've, been working in sort of both of the markets. Now,
Mhm.
um from your experience, I would say as a European, a French person coming to now work in the US, what have been
Mhm,
some of the biggest differences that you've seen, I guess, between this could be between France and the US as a country, as the way things function, or
mhm,
even between, customer relationships, doing business, things like that.
mhm. Yeah, I think, I mean, first, when you come to the US, you have to consider that you don't know anything about the US because we
Mm,
have a tendency to think we know a lot of stuff. I mean, we hear in France or Europe almost every day about the US,
right. Yeah.
but the way of thinking, working are very, very different. So you really have to come with an open mind and be ready
Mm,
to adapt yourself to the US market.
yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, for example, customer service in the US is key. I
Mm,
mean, the customers are kings, and
yeah.
you have to say yes to almost everything they ask for. So you have first to agree with it to find the
Sure.
right balance. But this is something, for example, that we are trying to duplicate and do the same in Europe.
Mm,
And it's a good way also providing really focusing on customer service
mm,
and your customer experience in Europe is a good
right.
way also to differentiate yourself from other European brands or companies. Yes.
Yeah. Customer service is one of the biggest, I think, for me, I would say as an American living in France, I can definitely see a lot of differences
Hmm.
between, the way that you are treated as a customer. And I'm not saying this is true for all businesses. I don't
Hmm.
want to make a giant generalization, but definitely, like you said, in the US, if you don't have that attitude that the customer is king, you're going to have a
Hmm.
lot of difficulty doing business with American clients because I feel like they do have high expectations of customer service. I don't know if that's
Oh
your
yeah, that's
feeling.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like I mean, sometimes we have requests where you're like, okay, I mean, where is that coming from? But
Right.
you're like, I'd rather keep that customer and make him happy than instead of getting some bad reviews on Google or on the website.
Yeah,
So that's
exactly.
definitely something we are trying to focus on. And after it's just the way we talk, in or American people are very enthusiastic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes there is definitely a different level and of
Right.
enthusiasm between the US and France.
Yeah.
So you have to I mean, in our French or European mind, you have to tone down some of the reactions to be at the right level.
Right.
The very positive thing to me is that people here are not afraid to try. So if they like what you show them, they're going to give it a try. And if it's
Right.
working, great. If it's not, no problem. But at least they try. Where in
Yeah.
Europe, it's definitely more challenging to have people take some risk.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's one thing that I think is different as well. And then again, I remember when I had some of my bosses came from my previous work experience, came to
Yeah.
the US. We had meetings with some customers, and I could see that during the meetings our customers would tell some stuff, and my boss
Yeah.
would agree on some things, and I was
Yeah.
really surprised. And when we left, I'm like, I told him, I'm like, that when Jeff said that, he meant that. And my boss looked at me like, really? And
Yeah.
I think, I mean, he would understand the English, but I don't think he was fully understanding the meaning of what the guy meant. And
Right.
so again, you have to really be careful, listen as much as possible to make sure that you understand. But I would say that's true in every country you go to. Yeah.
Sure, sure, yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you have some examples, but for maybe that's a very good situation of where you can hear the words that they're saying, but then the
Mm-hmm.
question is, do you understand the meaning behind that? And I don't know, is there any examples that you can think of where there has been some confusion between the words that were said or what you heard or
Mm-hmm.
what maybe someone heard and what was the actual meaning? I guess any kind of like
Well, I
communication
mean,
confusions
to
there.
come back to that example is, in the US, when you sell to stores and our, industry,
Mm,
very often you offer some employee deals. So for the
sure.
employees to buy your products at a low price.
Yeah.
And the guy was, talking about 50% off. And
Mm,
my boss thought it was 50% off the retail price. And the guy was talking about 50% off the wholesale price.
right.
So that's a big difference. And
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
because that concept is not very strong in Europe,
Right. Yeah.
my boss didn't think about the potential of giving 50% of the wholesale price, which is basically less
Yeah.
than what we sell to the store to. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I
Hmm.
think yeah, one of the speaking of prices, I believe in France, I'm not sure if it's the same in Europe, but there's regulations around how much discount you can give on a
Hmm.
product. In the US, I feel like it's not the case. I mean, if you give the discount you want to give, and if you're going to lose money, well, that's your problem. It's
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, basically you can do whatever you want. I mean, the good thing though on pricing is, in Europe and especially with online business,
Mm,
it's different. I mean, you're not allowed to dictate your
mm,
retail price.
right.
So sometimes it's difficult to manage. In the
Mm,
US, if you sell a product $100, you can ask all your retailers to sell at $100 as well. And if they don't
mm.
follow the rules, you can call them on, ask them to
Okay.
go back to the price.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if they don't want to do it, then you can say, okay, I'm not selling to you anymore.
Okay,
So
right.
that's
Yeah. So
that makes things a lot easier to control your brand, control pricing online than on the European market.
Interesting. Yeah, so that's a very helpful tip, I think, for anyone who might be thinking about setting up and selling online or with
Hmm.
some retailers in the US. Now, um, talking a little bit about the branding and how you communicate around your products. Now, the first question is, do you have a different message, and do you have different, I would say, marketing, communication, positioning for the US market versus the European market, or
Hmm.
is it the same?
We try to, in the US, to be as American as possible in our
Okay.
communication.
Yeah.
So we do more and more photo shoots. And in the US, for example, we have someone in the US doing all our communication and text and content.
Mm.
And in France, we sometimes talk about France,
Yeah.
being from Annecy, which is where our headquarters is.
Right. Yeah.
But so we try to adapt, for sure. And it's, the US consumer, I think, they are willing to buy, foreign brands, but again, you have to make it as easy as possible for them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so
hmm
do you, I guess, do you communicate around the fact that you're a French company made in France, or I don't know where you actually produce the shoes,
hmm
but maybe designed in France, or is there any kind of communication where you put that sort of French identity forward? And I ask that question because it is often a question that comes up with
hmm
clients is, you know, can I communicate about the fact that we're French and use that as a marketing argument?
Yeah, I think it really depends on your market and positioning. To
Mm,
where we are positioned today, we are, I would say, in the mid-level in terms of pricing,
yeah.
and we are at the same kind of positioning in terms of price as US brands,
Sure.
and so I think the French factor, or the French stuff, really plays when you are in the higher end or luxury markets. We
Right.
I used to sell some ski brands
Yeah.
in the US, and one of them was the brand Kili from Jean-Claude Kili,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and but it was very high end. We were selling jackets at $2,000 or
Mm,
more,
yeah.
and the that consumer was really interested in the fact that it was coming from France.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, but at the same time, I was selling some outdoor brands, competing with US brands,
Yeah. Sure.
and people didn't care. So we were,
Mm,
and that was one of the challenges we had, where the brand was really its communication really focused on the French Alps, everything about
right.
France.
Yeah.
And in fact, after a few seasons, the guys in the US and the buyers were like, okay, you don't have any other story to tell.
Right.
So yeah, so for us, I mean, we really don't communicate about France in the US.
Mm,
Uh, Again, we try to be as American as
yeah.
we can. And but if like we started to sell like last year in Korea,
hmm
and the Korean market really is in demand for French products.
Okay.
So there
Interesting.
we communicate a lot more about France than we can here.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So yeah. So if you're in, I guess it's you sit down and you think about, well, what are sort of the typical maybe almost stereotypical
Yeah. hmm
French industries. It is things like luxury, fashion,
Food.
food,
Yeah. Yeah.
etc.
Hmm
There it would make sense that that would have a
Yeah.
kind of an added
hmm
value. But if you're, like you said, sort of a mid-range product,
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. And and
Right.
and and
Yeah.
for example, for us, when I worked in the outdoor industry and the ski industry,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of, in fact, ski brands initially came from Europe. So all the
Mm,
stores, the buyers, they were always used to buy French or European brands.
right.
Um, if you look at the outdoor market, there are tons of brands, US brands
Yeah.
already.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the fact that you are coming from Europe, if you don't have a product advantage or something different, they
Mm,
don't really see why they would buy, a European brands. They often
mm.
like have one or two in their mix just to have them,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
different, but it's not like really a strong focus. Yeah.
Okay, right. Like it's not a strong enough argument that would make, let's
hmm
say you've got an American brand and a French brand,
hmm
um, pretty
Yeah,
similar
yeah,
prices, pretty similar, it's not going to make a
yeah.
difference in that sell
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
buying
We
decision.
launched, at sometimes we were selling sleeping bags, and we
Yeah.
launched a very light sleeping bag, and there was none in the US market at the time. So I mean, our business like took off, like
Oh, right.
really crazy.
Nice.
We
Yeah.
become the number one market for the brand, the
Good.
US
Yeah.
market.
Yeah.
But then after, I mean, US brands starting to do similar bags, and then we
Right.
lost momentum because then why do we have to bother to buy from a brand that's not that known? Because they don't. I mean, the product differentiation was not there anymore.
Right. Yeah. You've got, other competitors doing similar things. And so your uniqueness,
Yes, yeah.
just kind of disappeared. And I would say, maybe for you, in your experience, what have been maybe some of the most positive things about doing business in the US? And then, of course, I'm going to ask you also some of the most negative things about doing business in the US or with Americans, let's say.
Yeah. Some of the positive things, again, I love working with American because the relationship is very simple and very straightforward.
Sure.
So it's like, they can say yes or no. It's no hard feelings, and we can just move forward.
Right.
Again, they are willing to try and give a chance to new brands, new products.
Yeah.
So I would say that's really something that's, very interesting and exciting.
Yeah.
It's also, within the US, you definitely have some pretty strong cultural differences. For example, if you look at, New England and California, the experience is very, very different. To me, it's like if you are working in Europe with a Scandinavian and someone from Southern Europe, it's
right. Yeah.
It's
totally different cultures.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then, the negative points.
Can I ask you a question about the cultural differences before we get into the negative points? There, like you said, there are very big cultural differences. Do you take that into consideration in things like marketing, working with clients, etc., or does it really not make a difference in your strategy?
Marketing, not too much. And we are not at a size where we can anyway.
Sure.
I would say, again, you have to, if you go on the East Coast in New England and you're going to travel with some sales reps to go and see some clients, very often, you have the whole schedule ready ahead of time. You know where you're going to. Yeah. You go to California, you have no idea what's going to happen, and then but things happen. But it's definitely not the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So kind of at the maybe the macro level of your communications and your marketing and all of that, not really going to make an impact. But then when you get really on that micro level about interacting with people, it's there where you're going to see the differences. Okay, that's a very interesting insight.
And also on the product side, we're gonna sell a lot more colorful products in the Rockies, on the West Coast, where basically if you go to New England, if you have brown, black, and gray, you're good. Pretty good.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Okay. And going back to so maybe some of the negative points that you've seen about working in the U.S. or doing business with Americans.
Sometimes it's, I would say communication where, people don't get back to you. So that's,
I've heard that.
In Europe, I would say people get back to you. It might take some time, but at least at some point they get back to you.
Yeah.
We have had like some sales reps you're working with, and suddenly you don't hear anything from them.
Yeah.
You try to email, call, they don't get back to you, and that's it.
And that's it. And what do you do in that? How do you guys handle that if you're willing to share that information?
At some point, sometimes it happened that I stopped paying commissions for them to call me back.
Yeah. Okay. Because, and does that work?
And in fact, sometimes it works. Sometimes they didn't call back.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
interesting.
I would say that's some frustration sometimes about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Are there any other frustrations?
Not much. No.
Okay. So more the communication and not getting back to. Yeah. Right. Okay. And just to wrap up, is there any, I guess this is kind of a question I've started asking at the end of all of the episodes is there a piece of advice or something that you wish you had known when you were
hmm
starting out in the US that you would like to share with someone?
I think, I mean, and that's something I've experienced during COVID, is
Mm,
it's either you're committed to the US or you're not.
mm,
And either you can have a local presence or not.
okay.
Working with the US from Europe and not being able to come and come that often is very difficult to manage.
Mm,
And I would say, both the retailers, your sales reps, the consumers need to see some really strong commitment to the US market.
okay, right.
Yeah,
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 I think that's good advice. It's not
yeah,
something you
yeah.
can kind of do halfway.
No, no, and
Right.
it's definitely an expensive market.
Yeah.
The cost of living, the cost of doing business is way more expensive than France.
Right. Yeah.
To give you an example, I mean, we organized some photo shoots here in the US, uh, and it was close to 4 times more expensive than doing one in France. And I
Yeah.
would say it's kind of the like I would say at least twice, but very often 3 times more expensive to do stuff here than
Mm.
in Europe. Yeah,
And yeah, exactly. I
yeah,
remember I had a client who, I think they were in California,
mm-hmm.
somewhere on the West Coast anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And she was telling me, she said, yeah, with my husband, I make, so it was like something like 12,000 a month. My husband makes 10,000 a month. We barely get by.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Whereas if
Mm-hmm.
you're making that in France, you're totally rich.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
right.
yeah. But the thing is, I mean, because when you look at salaries,
Yeah.
because of the social system is very different, as you know,
Mm,
from the US, and so you have to put money aside for your
exactly.
kids' schools, for retirement, so
Yeah.
your gross income might be a lot more, but
Yeah.
when you start paying or saving, everything you have to just to get the
Yeah.
same stuff as in France, it's a big difference for sure.
Exactly. It's a lot of the stuff that is paid for in France, by the
Mm-hmm.
taxes and
Yeah.
the higher rate of taxes in the social system.
Mm-hmm.
Just remember that you're going to be paying that out of your own pocket in the US.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, no,
yeah.
so it's I mean, you definitely, and you can see. I mean, that's one of the challenges for a
Mhm.
brand or for even for a younger brand to be in the US is to be able to hire people because I
Mm,
mean, as soon as you hire someone good,
yeah.
the cost can be really, really big. So for us, we decided to keep, in fact, all our operations.
Hmm.
So in France, and
Yeah.
that's where it's in place. And
Okay.
we are
Yeah.
building more of the marketing and sales side just for the US.
Yeah.
But there are
Makes
some
sense.
things that you can definitely manage from France. Um,
Mm.
but again, it's if you come to the US, you have to commit to it, and you have to be ready for pretty heavy budgets.
Yeah, yeah, like prepare well your
Yeah,
finances, right?
yeah, sure, sure.
Okay, great. All right, Guillaume, thank you very much. And before we finish, where can people find you, find out about your products, connect with you?
It's the easiest is on our website at saola.com,
Yeah.
or then you can reach out to us if you want to see if you have some local retailers around you.
Okay, great. Sounds good. And I'll put all the links to the website and everything in the notes for the podcast. And Guillaume, thank you very much for coming on, for sharing your experience, and have fun out in Colorado.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.